Just in general, it's important that let's get that door closed. In general, it's important that we pay attention during class, but today especially it's important, not because the subject matter that we're covering is particularly dense or difficult, but because we're going to be using some technical terminology. So we're going to be using technical, philosophical Sanskrit words, which are, even in the Sanskrit language, multivalent. They can have, multiple meanings. What to speak of in English. So it's incredibly complicated because the words themselves are ambiguous and enigmatic and somewhat cryptic. And then we're now translating them into English. So even for a native speaker, these terms are at least somewhat puzzling. And in fact, they're used in different ways in different texts. So it's important to bring our A game always when we're studying a serious piece of literature. But today is especially so because we're going to be looking at half a dozen terms which are going to be used in a real specific way, and the terms themselves are cryptic. All right, so that's our intro. That's our disclaimer. We're on chapter 7, text 29. And we're following up on text 28. Te dvandva moha vinirmukta nirmukta bhajante mam dridha brataha. So with great vows they worship me, free from dualities and illusion. They're free from dualities and illusion. What do you got?
I could grab my eyeglasses. I can't see.
Can you just look it up on your phone and make it big? Look it up on your phone, make it big. Otherwise it'd be gone too. Where's your car at? Right there? Go. Grab him real quick. I'm waiting for you. Run. I'm not going to wait. So the last verse, text 28. Free from illusion. Oh wow, that was fast. I wasn't going to wait for you. Just said I was. The last verse says, they who are free from dualities. What are dualities? It's a non-rhetorical question. Pleasure and pain, victory and defeat, honor and dishonor. Good. It's a kind of a standard. Dvandva means dualness. And so it's a standard term used in Sanskrit to refer to elation and depression, to refer to attachment and aversion, love and hate, victory and defeat, honor and dishonor, pleasure and pain, heat and cold, these material dualities that we experience that people get wrapped up in. Now, that would be an example, dvandva, dualness, which is a term, which is a philosophical term, but it's really only used in one way. And so anytime you encounter dvandva, you know what it's referring to. Tell me to be quiet. Go quick. Anytime you encounter the term dvandva, you know what it's referring to. It's referring to these types of dualities that people experience. The next terms that we're going to encounter are not as easy, as you'll see. Next, so this is the first text we're studying today, text 29. And it's going into those people who worship Krishna, bhajante, budge, to worship, to share, becomes bhakti, and then it also becomes conjugated as a verb into words like bhajante, they worship me. Dridha vrataha, with great vows. So now we're talking about devotees who are worshiping Krishna, and we're speaking more about those devotees who are worshiping Krishna. Jara marana mokshaya mam ashritya yatanti ye. They who strive to liberate themselves from old age and death and take shelter of me. By taking shelter of me. So those who taking shelter of me are trying to liberate themselves from old age and death. And they're striving to do that. Te Brahma Tat Vidhu Kritsnam. They know that Brahman completely. Adhyatma Karma Cha Akilam. And they also entirely know Adhyatma and Karma. So they know Brahman completely. Brahman is a super multivalent term in the Sanskrit language. Brahman is used in the Gita to refer to material nature, Mahat Brahma. It's used to refer to sacred texts. It's used to refer to the individual soul in a state of self-realization. Just wrap your head around that. The word Brahman means material nature in one context. And in another context, it means the soul free from matter. You follow? Brahma Bhuta. You become Brahman. Prasanatmana sochati na kankshati. You're joyful, you're never hanker, never lament. And then Brahman also refers to Krishna. Sometimes Krishna's Param Brahma, the Supreme Brahman. Sometimes he's Brahmano hi pratishtaham, on the foundation of Brahman. So he's above Brahman. Sometimes he is Brahman. Sometimes he's above Brahman. Sometimes he's a special, highest manifestation of Brahman. Sometimes the soul in self-realization is said to be in Brahman. Sometimes Brahman is sacred text, and sometimes Brahman is straight matter that needs to be transcended. Primordial matter. So the word Brahman is an extremely important term. It's used all over the Upanishads. But you have to look at the context very, very carefully to know what Brahman is intending to say. Because you could, these interpretations of what Brahman means, they are not interpretations like, I think Brahman means this and you think Brahman means this. They're, by carefully examining the verses, it becomes clear what's being communicated by the term Brahman within that verse. And these things I just mentioned are all communicated by the term Brahman. But that's not, obviously anything is debatable, but that's not legitimately debatable, because you can see very clearly from the context that these different meanings are being made. So Brahman is a big one. Don't confuse Brahma with Brahma. Brahma, line over the last A, is the demiurge who creates the material world. Brahma is spirit, God, matter, sacred text. And Brahman is oftentimes in the Upanishads used to represent the highest truth, in other words, God. Brahman becomes identified as a person in the Gita. And so whereas the Upanishads will oftentimes speak of Tat Brahma, that Brahman, the Gita will speak of I and me and mine. And so there's we could call it an evolution from the Upanishads to the Gita, where the Upanishads are more third person. Brahman is an it. And in the Gita, Brahman is a person. It's an I or a me. Of course, if Brahman is an it, you can't really have a relationship. It becomes very abstract. Bhakti depends on a relationship with Brahman. And so the Gita, which is written in the Upanishadic style, elevates the discussion of Brahman, where Brahman is spoken of as both personal and impersonal in the Upanishads, and then Brahman gets spoken of in exclusively and hierarchically personalist terms in the Gita, where the personal feature of divinity is considered to be the topmost. Now, that's what the Gita teaches. Krishna literally says, Brahmano hi pratishtaham, I am the source of Brahman. Brahmanaha, of Brahman. Aham pratishtam, I am the foundation of Brahman. Wild, right? There's a verse, Mam chayo vyabhicharana bhakti yogana sevate saganan samatitaitam brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Those who unflinchingly serve me in bhakti, bhakti yogena sevate, they practice. Sevate here means practice. Bhakti, with bhakti yoga. Avyabhicharana, without deviating. Mam, to me. They practice bhakti to me without deviating. Sagunan samatitaitam, they transcend the gunas, which is the goal of the Gita. They transcend matter. Brahma bhuyaya kalpate, they are fit, kalpate, he is fit for becoming Brahman. Brahma bhuyaya, for becoming Brahman. Why? By serving Krishna, do you become Brahman? Because Brahmanaha hi pratishtaham, because I am the foundation of Brahman. I am the source of Brahman. There's a verse, Brahma Bhuta, you become Brahman, and then Mad Bhaktim Labate Param, then you achieve supreme bhakti to Krishna. So by practicing bhakti, you become Brahman, and then in the stage of Brahman, you can then achieve Param Bhakti. You follow? Bhaktim Labate Param, then you achieve supreme bhakti, because bhakti is not seen as merely an intermediate practice which then leads to a goal of becoming one with God. Rather, bhakti is an intermediate practice which then purifies you till you become completely spiritualized, at which point you can engage in the supreme bhakti. And you can love Krishna forever. So bhakti becomes both the means as well as the end. Both sadhya and sadhana. The practice and the goal of the practice. So the Gita really elevates the discussion of Brahman. But beyond the Gita and beyond the Upanishads, there is the reality that you exist as an individual conscious being. How could your source not be individual and conscious? You have the capacity for love. How could your source not have the capacity for love? Unless you want to relegate love and relationship to all being illusion. If you value love and compassion and relationship as being eternal, then God has to be a person. Otherwise, your source doesn't have what you have, and you become more than God. You follow that? Now, let's say somebody wants to just go ahead and bite the bullet and go, I think love and relationships are all material. Well, then how did that source of everything, which had no features and no love, and that was the supreme source, give rise to you who have the ability to love? Why was this world created in the first place? Why do we have individual souls in this world? If the highest thing is to become one and not have any of those pesky features like relationships and interpersonal dealings as being part of the fundamental structure of reality, and that's all part of the illusion, then how did Brahman ever give rise to this world of illusion? Where did it come from? Where did the illusion come from? Where did the degradation come from? How did Brahman fall? How did you, who are Brahman, fall down to become an individual? How did that happen? How did that occur? Well, it's an illusion. It never occurred. Even now, you're still Brahman. Okay, then how did the illusion that it occurred occur? Because the illusion is still something. Because you now have Brahman with no illusion, and you have Brahman with illusion. And Brahman with illusion is different than Brahman with no illusion on some level. Even if it's merely just on some level there's an illusion. Fine, that illusion is something which has affected Brahman and created this situation in this material world. So where did that come from? How did something without personality, without individuality, without variety, without the capacity for love give rise to even the illusion of a world where those things exist? So this elevation of the discussion of the somewhat enigmatic, personal and impersonal Brahman of the Upanishads to a full-fledged personal deity in the Gita exclusively, as creating a hierarchy where that impersonal feature is relegated to a lower level. And the personal feature is seen as the source of that impersonal feature, as the master set from which the impersonal feature is one number. That is not merely just, okay, well, that's what the Gita did. It's also logically impossible that you got a personal deity and individual souls from an impersonal Brahman. It's logically impossible that you got us and a personal deity from an impersonal Brahman. Alternatively, if you value love and relationship, it's impossible not to conceive of those features as existing within the deity. They may be apparently anthropic qualities, but upon inspection, they're revealed to be necessary qualities in any proper definition of God. Did you guys follow what I just did? Did you follow what I just did? What did I just do?
You showed how if there's illusion affecting Brahman, then there has to be some reason for that. And everything has to. Everything in this.
Hold on. Do you feel that you did a good job of synopsizing what I said?
No, I was synopsizing like 1 minute earlier.
I don't know what that means. But okay, let's move on. Did you follow what I just did? What did I just do? Did you follow it or not?
Doubting myself now.
Okay, I'm not really interested in doubting. I'm interested in answers. Did you follow what I said? What did I say?
How it's logically impossible for us to be superior with things like relationships and love and compassion than the Brahman who's supposed to be above us.
Who's our source?
Exactly.
Okay, good. That's number one. I'm going to say it again. Please listen more carefully. Number one, the Gita elevates the discussion from a personal/impersonal Brahman to a fully personal deity that then is at the top of the apex and would have given rise to the impersonal feature as a subsidiary or derivative feature. But a personal deity is at the top of the totem pole. First thing I said. Second thing I said, and I gave evidence for that from the Gita. Second thing I said is beyond the Gita, just from the point of view of straight logic, And I made 2 points in relationship to this. A, if you value love and relationships, you have to conceive of God as having those features because they are valuable features and they couldn't have come from an impersonal deity. Number 2, if you go big and say, I don't believe in love and relationships, you're still in trouble because they at least exist in illusion, and that illusion had to come from someplace. If you posit an impersonal absolute as the origin of everything, that becomes a problem, because how would you have gotten these features of reality, even in an illusory form, from an impersonal absolute? 2 points. 3 points total, 2 points in relation to why it's logically impossible. Did you guys follow that? At least you're not nodding your head now. Good. Did you follow that? Yes or no? I'm looking at you, dude. I'm not looking at anybody else. I'm still looking at you, Dalen. Answer my question.
My contacts are... I'm so sorry.
You need new contacts.
I know.
Answer my question. Did you follow what I said? No. Narayan, did you follow what I said?
Yes.
Go for it.
So the point that I mentioned, and then also
No, don't. Sorry. No. Stop. Start at the beginning.
we can't be superior with love.
Start at the beginning.
An impersonal being.
Start at the beginning. Who can start at the beginning and make 3 points?
Totem pole, the top is the personal.
Say it again.
The top of the totem pole is the personal.
According to the Gita. Okay, so you also didn't get it right. I made 3 points. 1 was what the Gita teaches, and number 2 and 3 were why it's logically impossible to teach anything else. I made first point was what the Gita teaches. Second points were evidence beyond the Gita of the legitimacy of what the Gita teaches. You have to say them in order because they are structured in order. And you have to include the essential elements, one of which is that the Gita teaches. Who can do it?
You cited an example from the Gita, and you provided 2 logical reasons for how.
All right. Now we got there. Who can give me more? Does that, at least you got like a C. At least you have a passing grade. The rest of you are Fs. But at least you got a passing grade. Who can do more detail? Really? I mean, I've said it like 4 times now. Go.
Second point?
No. Start from the beginning.
So at the
By the way, it's really simple. The Gita teaches that God is a person. The Upanishads are kind of half and half, but the Gita makes it a God a person, and that impersonal form is an abstract derivative feature of the personal form. The personal form is the top of the totem pole. That's point number 1. I said it like 4 times there in 20 seconds. Point number 2, above and beyond the Gita saying that, it's also logically necessary to conclude this. Why? Because if you value love, then the source of you has to also have the capacity for love, and love is the feature of a person. It's an attribute of a person. 10 seconds, I made point 2. Number 3, if you go whole hog and decide that you're going to say love is an illusion and go like this extreme Buddhist impersonalist route and really commit to it, in a way that even Buddhists oftentimes don't do, because they have the bodhisattvas and their arhants blessing the world, and they have all sorts of stuff like that they had to develop, because to have this idea that compassion and love are just illusion is just too much for almost anybody to take. But if you were willing to commit to that argument, then you solve the problem, which is that those things exist. Then you might say, well, they only exist in the form of illusion. Well, fine. Then Brahman still gave rise to the illusion that those things exist, and therefore you still have those things existing in some capacity within Brahman, and Brahman is no longer impersonal, it's personal. 3 points in that order, each one leads to the next. Who can do it? I didn't prep this before class. I have this memorized. All of you should have this memorized. This isn't something I worked out and now I'm giving you guys a hard time. I just know this stuff. It's like I know my multiplication tables. 12 times 9 is 108. Like I know stuff. Go. And I picked you first. And then you like, hubba-da, hubba-da, hubba-da. You like Just blew it. But I picked you first. I thought you'd be able to nail this and we could move on. Go.
The Gita teaches that God is personal, and then
By the way, that's one complete. Nothing more than that's required. Go.
number two, if you value love and you think that love is eternal, then those features of loving relationship must be present in divinity.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't make it like super strong, like somebody's just going to be like floored by what you said, but it was like a B. But you got it. You nailed it. If you value love, relationships, compassion, any kind of interaction between two people as having value beyond this world, within transcendence, you believe in any capacity, the potential for love to exist within transcendence, then that love must originate in a personal deity, and love is the feature of a person. It's an attribute of a person. It's a power of a person. Do you follow it better now? It's a solid argument. And you should be able to say it backwards and forwards from a number of different angles. Good. 2. Number 3.
Number three is that if you're going to double down and say that relationship is illusion, it would still mean that that illusion affecting Brahman has to have a source, and so that source
Must be from Brahman, therefore on some level Brahman must still be personal. Fundamentally. Good. You got it. Great. And obviously there's a lot more we could do with that third argument and tease it out from different angles of vision. But yeah, you got the core of it. Can you guys do this or not? Can you do this? Do it. Go.
Bhagavad Gita teaches that personal conception of deity is at the highest apex.
Boom. That's even better than what he said. It's even better. If at the apex, that acknowledges the lower conception exists in some other text, but this is the highest conception, and all other ones are derivative. That's great. So you just even better on number 1. Number 2?
If you value love and compassion and relationships, then you have had to have gotten those sentiments from another being.
That capacity from a personal deity capable of love. Good. 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 Excellent. Number 3.
If you double down,
And that's a good. I really like that. If you double down, I exactly. If you go for it and you commit that love is illusion, all relationships are illusion, that the impersonal is the highest, then
you're acknowledging that it exists, even if it's in the form of an illusion.
you can't get around the fact that we're sitting here having a conversation as individuals capable of relationships. And if you then try to dismiss it by saying it's all illusion, well then great, the illusion of it still exists. And that means it came from Brahman. That means Brahman must have those variegated features within it. Excellent. You got it. You nailed it. You see how important it is to be able to make these points? This is ABC stuff. You must be able to make these points. And one thing is the teacher comes from the Gita. The other one is to show that the Gita is eminently reasonable in this regard. Makes perfect sense. Is perfectly logical and reasonable in this regard. And any other position is unreasonable. You see how important it is to be able to make that argument? Yes or no? And I just made it for you guys, really simply. And so you have to memorize it and be able to belt it out in different octaves to different audiences. By rote, you need to memorize these arguments. Good. Excellent. Excellent. So Brahman, right? Just the word Brahman gives rise to conversations like this. And this is just we're just touching it now. The word Brahman gives rise to conversations like this. A singular monistic source of all reality, both material and spiritual. How does matter come from spirit? How are we connected? How are we Brahman, small Brahman? How is Krishna big Brahman? How are we connected? What qualities do we have in common with our source? What qualities are distinct? These are the natural questions that happen as soon as you introduce a concept like Brahman. And then, so they know Brahman completely, which would mean knowing all this stuff. And then they also entirely, akilam, they know adhyatma and karma. Well, karma is easy, right? We know what karma means. It means action, actions that result in reactions. We got that one down. That's like dvandva. We know how that's used. But then we got adhyatma. Adhi, as a prefix in Sanskrit, means over and above. It can also mean besides and in relationship to. And so adhyatma, in relationship to atma. Atma can be oneself, as a simple reflexive pronoun. Atma can also be mind, body, or spirit. Usually atma means the self distinct from matter. And this would be now adhyatma, the supreme self. That would be almost a term for God, like paramatma. Adhyatma could be like paramatma. Adhyaksha, the overseer. So adhyatma could be like paramatma, supreme soul, the oversoul, the super soul. Yes?
And also there is the term for Brahma, Parabrahma. Is that related to the super soul?
Krishna refers to himself as Param Brahma. Arjuna calls Krishna Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram, Paramam Bhavam, Purusham, Shashvatam, Divyam, Adidevam, Ajam Vibhum. So Arjuna tells Krishna in the 10th chapter, a couple chapters from now, in response to all this information Krishna's given him, he says, Param Brahma, you are the supreme Brahman. Param Dhamma, you are the supreme abode. Pavitram, you are pure. Paramam Bhavan, you are the supreme reality. Purusham Shashvatam, you are the eternal person. Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, you are divine. Adi Devam, you are the original God. Ajam, you are unborn. Vibhum, you are the greatest. So these terms are used for Krishna. But Krishna also identifies himself with Brahman and says, I am Brahman. So you have both in the Gita. Sometimes Brahman is lower and Krishna is the supreme Brahman. Sometimes Krishna is the foundation of Brahman. Sometimes Krishna is Brahman. Sometimes Holy Scriptures are Brahman. Sometimes individual souls become Brahman. And sometimes material nature is Brahman. And so the word Brahman is used in all those ways in the Gita. Do you follow? So it's complicated, right?
From my understanding, I'm considering Brahma as the creator of this material universe, and the Parabrahma and all the other.
No. Brahma. Brahman. Brahma. That is the term we're discussing. Brahma, which is from the same root, is the creator God. And then Param Brahma. Krishna is not Param Brahma, he's Param Brahma. You understand the difference? Like in Hindi, you could say Param Brahm. You could just drop the A entirely. You follow? Or you say Brahman or Brahma as opposed to Brahma. Do you see the difference now? Good. I mentioned that, but you missed it. You didn't.
You mentioned that, but it keeps running in my mind. Is that a Brahma? Initially, when you start with that, the A.
Param Brahma.
Brahma.
Param Brahma. Param Brahma. Param Dhamma. Pavitram Paramam Bhavan. So that's Param Brahman, not Param Brahma. You follow? All right. So, Adhyatma does not mean supreme soul here. Although that would be a good translation of it, it doesn't mean that here. As you're going to see. Last verse. Oh, let's read the translation. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in devotion in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. So there, Prabhupada's saying karma, he's saying it's transcendental activities. He's saying they're Brahman, so Prabhupada's translation is they're Brahman. It says they know Brahman, but you could also say they become Brahman. It's also said in other places. Prabhupada's translation is a little like, you could say maybe non-literal. So, whatever. But you see, there you go. Sa adi bhuta adi daiva mam. Sa adi yagyam cha ye vidhu. They know me along with Adi Yagya, Adi Daiva, and Adi Bhuta. Now we have 3 more terms. Adi Daiva, Supreme Divine. Adi Yagya, Supreme Yagya. Adi Bhuta, Supreme Being. Adhyatma, Supreme Soul. And Mam, me. So the problem is, how is Krishna separate from the Supreme Being, Supreme Soul, and Supreme Divine? So now these terms have to be understood differently than just in their literal, the most literal basic meaning. And in fact, these terms are all used in the Upanishads in a variety of ways. So these terms get used in different Upanishads in different ways. So these terms, especially Adhyatma, but all these terms are found in various Upanishads. So what Krishna is doing now is he's introducing Upanishadic language. So, like I mentioned before, the Gita is written very much like an Upanishad, but Krishna elevates the discussion and creates a hierarchy with himself at the apex, top of the totem pole. And now he's co-opting and utilizing and introducing Upanishadic language, which will now be defined very specifically in how it's understood in the Gita. And so he's introducing these terms, which already existed and were highly philosophical terms, which were used in our sacred text in a variety of ways, and now Krishna is going to define those terms. And so Krishna starts off by saying, you will know me along with Adi Yagya, Adi Daiva, Adi Bhuta, Adhyatma, Karma, and Brahman. 6 terms. Prayana kale apicha mam te vidhur yukta chetasaha. And one whose mind is yoked will be able to know me even at the time of death. So this is a transcendental understanding which even goes beyond death. So naturally the question is, what do all these terms mean? And Arjuna's question, let's read those in full consciousness of me who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of material manifestation of the demigods and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of God, even at the time of death. So therefore Prabhupada tries to give a translation for each of those terms. And gives a good translation for each of those terms. Next chapter, Arjuna says, Kim Tat Brahma. What is that Brahman? Kim means what? Kim Adhyatma. What is Adhyatma? Kim Karma. What is Karma? Purushottama, O Supreme Being. Adi Bhutam cha Kim Proktam. What is Adi Bhuta? What is this Adi? What has been spoken as Adi Bhuta? What has been declared to be Adi Bhuta? Adi Daiva Kim Uchate, and what is said to be Adi Daiva? So what's Arjuna's questions?
What is Brahma?
What is Arjuna doing here? Sorry, maybe more. Let me ask the question properly. What is Arjuna doing here?
Asking for the terms to be defined.
That's right. Because Krishna introduced the terms, but did not define them. And these terms are enigmatic enough where they're not just obvious to someone who speaks Sanskrit, because they're highly philosophical, technical terms. Therefore, Arjuna now asks, what do these terms mean? You follow? And that starts the 8th chapter. And the 8th chapter is very much about revisiting the Upanishads in light of the Gita's theology. And so you find any number of Upanishadic concepts and verses show up in the 8th chapter. In fact, the entire 8th chapter is a revisiting and commentating on the Upanishads in relationship to Krishna. There's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 subjects in the 8th chapter, and all of them come from the Upanishads. In fact, Krishna directly quotes verses from the Upanishads in the 8th chapter, as he does in several other places in the Gita, 15th chapter notably, but especially in the 8th and 15th chapter. And the entire 8th chapter is Upanishadic concepts and verses being revisited by Krishna. So Arjuna asks, what do these terms mean? Why does Arjuna ask what these terms mean? So we can learn them too. Why would Arjuna, who speaks Sanskrit and is fluent because he's speaking the Gita with Krishna, why would he ask what these terms mean? Because they're philosophical, enigmatic terms, even in the Sanskrit language. It's like defining a term like love is very complex. It can be a euphoric feeling, any positive emotional, content, all the way up to ecstatic, rapturous union with the divine in eternity. Those are all communicated by the word love. You can love a movie. You can love that the bus is on time. I love it when I go up to a stoplight and the walk sign just immediately goes, all right, just immediately turns green, I can drive. I love it when that happens. There'd be nothing wrong with saying that in English. And there's also nothing wrong with saying, I love God. But clearly the term love does not mean the same in both instances. We have a black belt in the way the word love is used in English. We have a very high level, very nuanced understanding. And in many languages they have multiple words for love. Eros and agape, romantic sexual love on one hand and then philosophical spiritual love on the other. Multiple words for love in many languages, including Sanskrit. But we just have one. And we just use it in a variety of ways and are able to communicate effectively with it because everybody else is initiated into the very nuanced way in which we use the term love. Te amo, te deseo. Super different in Spanish. 2 different ways of saying I love you. One appropriate to say to your child, the other one not appropriate to say to your child. One is romantic sexual, the other one is platonic. And yes, they are. Right? Te deseo, te amo. Super different. How different?
Desire. The deseo is like I desire you almost to me. It's like saying that, which is like a sexual connotation.
Anyway, the terms are used very, 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 very differently in Spanish. So yeah, Arjuna's asking these questions. What do these 6 terms mean? And now Krishna's going to answer him. And this is where it gets difficult. Everything up till now has been easy. Now things are going to get a little complex. Which is why it's important that we all pay attention. Here we go. What is, Arjuna's question, what is the Lord of sacrifice? How does he live in the body? Oh, sorry. What is Brahman? What is the self? What are further activities? What is material manifestation? And what are demigods? Please explain this to me. So Prabhupada is translating these terms more or less into English, with the exception of Brahman. Then, Adi Yagya Katam Kotra Dehe Asmin Madhusudana. Who is Adi Yagya? See the difference? Who is Adi Yagya? And how does he exist in the body? So that now the question's a little more leading, right? It's not just what is this, what is this, what is this. Who is Adi Yagya? And how does he exist in the body? What does that indicate Adi Yagya is? Person. Yeah, he's a person. And which person can we suspect? Adi Yagya. Krishna. The ultimate Lord of sacrifice, right? Good. There you go. Pranakale chakatam yeyo asi niyata atma bihi. How is the Adi Yagya to be known by the self-controlled souls at the time of death? So further indicating that it's Krishna, right? He's saying you can know me at the time of death. He's saying, how is that Adi Yagya to be known at the time of death? Indicating, hey, I know the Adi Yagya refers to you. Do you get it? So even in the question, we're being led to at least one of the answers. Who is the Adi Yagya? How is he in the body? And how is he to be known by the self-controlled soul at the time of death? And Krishna said, you can know me at the time of death. And now he says, how is he to be known? By the self-controlled soul. Krishna said, Yukta Chetasa, whose mind is yoked to me. And here's Niyata Atma Bhi, by the self-controlled selves, by the controlled selves. Okay, here we go. Things are going to get complicated right now for these next 3 verses, 2 verses, 3 verses. Here we go. Oh, and who is Lord of sacrifice? How does he live in the body? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? See how Prabhupada serves in devotional service? But that's going all the way back to the last chapter where it says, Bhajante mam dridha vrataha. They worship me with great vows. So that's it's not a stretch, because we're still continuing with the same discussion about these devotees who know Krishna through bhakti in this Upanishadic sense. Those who are bhaktas end up with the full knowledge of the Upanishads as a result of their bhakti. You get the point that's being made philosophically here? Those devotees who do bhakti, they completely know Krishna along with all these very, very deep, profound Upanishadic conceptions. I can say, you take my teacher training. It'll teach you everything you need to know. And then you start naming all the stuff from the other teacher trainings that people advertise. Right? And you say, you'll know this, you'll know this, you'll know this. Like let's say there's an Ashtanga studio, Patabi Joyce's Ashtanga Vinyas, where they've trademarked the name Ashtanga. You say, you take my training, we'll teach you everything you need to know about yoga. You'll know Ashtanga Vinyas. You follow? Or maybe there was some other, I don't know, a Vipassana school. Like you'll know Vipassana. And Shamatha, which is another term that's used in Buddhist text alongside Vipassana. 2 different types of meditation. You get it? You'll get core work out. You'll get core work done. There's some flight school, for handstands and inversions. You'll learn how to invert. You're saying, if you come to my school, you'll know all that stuff and more. You're saying this is complete. There's nothing left out. And so by Krishna citing all of this Upanishadic language here, he's making it clear that those people who worship him and become bhaktas, they get all the benefits of having studied and learned the Upanishads. I've never thought that till just now. And Prabhupada's keeping that alive by saying devotional service, because he's going all the way back to 5 verses previously, because this is all a continuation of that idea that was introduced. I'm like, that was worth class for me. This whole thing was worth it for me. That was like, wow, hey, look at that. That's what's going on here. And Prabhupada's translation really helps you understand that, because he always drags it back. It seems like he's being non-literal. Seems like he's being, over the top and going bhakti, big bhakti on every verse. But what he's really doing is he's reminding us of 5, 6 verses ago where it said bhakti, so we won't lose the thread of continuity of what's actually being communicated by Krishna here. By delving into these Upanishadic topics, as a result of saying these people who worship me with great vows, they know all this. It's very theologically meaningful the way these verses are structured by Krishna. And Prabhupada is drawing that out and reminding us of that every verse, every 2 verses, so we can't forget it. And so sometimes he breaks from a literal translation, but he does that to keep the thread of continuity alive, because we wouldn't be able to keep it on our own. You get lost. Okay. Aksharam Brahma Paramam. Brahman is the supreme indestructible, unchanging. The supreme indestructible, unchanging. Brahman is that. Brahman is spirit. Right? Or Brahman is God. Go either one. Brahman is spirit or Brahman is God. I like Brahman as spirit in this context. I even like Brahman is the individual soul. Is the individual soul unchanging? Yes. Is the individual soul supreme? Yes. Compared to the body. So you could even say Brahman here means the soul. But let's just go with spirit, but spirit would also include God who's spiritual as well as us who are ultimately spiritual. You can say, well, Param doesn't mean it's us, but sometimes we're described as being Param also. Where Krishna's para prakriti, or superior nature. So sometimes Param can also be used for the individual soul as well. But anyway, Brahman is the supreme, indestructible, unchanging reality. It's still enigmatic, but Brahman is being defined as spirit. There's still some questions. Is it us? Is it God? Is it both? You follow? Alright. Swabhava adhyatma uchate. Adhyatma is swabhav. What does swabhav mean in Hindi, Anshu?
Nature.
It means nature. Like if somebody was a thief, and I'm saying to Anshu, why is he stealing from me? Anshu, that's his swabhav. It means nature in a material sense. One's own being. Bhav means being. Like feel the bhav, feel the emotion, the sentiment, the being. Swabhav. It's one's own being. But it's used specifically in a material sense to refer to one's material nature. So adhyatma is swabhav. Swabhav that bhuta bhava udbhava kada, which gives rise to the material existence of living beings. Bhuta means being, bhava means state or being, udbhava means creates, kara means does. Bhuta bhava udbhava kada. It is that swabhav which gives rise to your experience as a creature. As a creature. As a being. Just like we have the word to be, and then the word to be becomes the noun being, like a person is a being, is a living being. Sanskrit's the same way. Bhuta is from the root bhu, which means to be, and bhuta means a being. Bhuta bhava, the state or the experience of being a being. You see how it's very similar language. Bhuta bhava, same root. Bhuta bhava udbhava, same root. Bhuta swabhava, bhuta bhava udbhava. It's the same root for all the words. Swabhava, your own nature, which udbhava, which gives rise to, bhuta bhava, your nature of existing in this world as a being. In other words, adhyatma refers to that thing which causes us to be born in this world. That thing which causes us to exist in this world. That thing which links ourself to the world. that's why it might be good to think of us as being Brahman, because in the next verse is about how we become incarcerated in a body. You follow? By our nature. And then Visarga Karma Sangita. Karma, it's known as karma, that which is Visarga, which creates the specific material body that you occupy. So now Swabhava, your nature, makes you enter this world, and then karma gives rise to your specific body. I'm following the commentary of Ramanujacharya, because you have to follow a commentary to understand these verses, because these verses are incredibly enigmatic, and they give rise to multiple competing commentaries. I think Ramanuja's is probably the most conservative, because it flows. Brahman spirit becomes interfaced with the material world through adhyatma, or your material nature, that creates the possibility of you entering this world, and then your specific body is created by your karma. And then the next, Adibhutam Kshara Bhava. And so the Adibhuta, which could mean supreme being, a literal translation, but Adibhuta here means that which belongs to beings. Kshara Bhava. Kshara, remember Akshara? Brahman is Akshara, indestructible. Here it's Kshara, it's destructible. Kshara Bhava, the destructible nature, is called Adibhuta. And that could be the material elements that make up your body. So now Brahman, spirit, becomes incarcerated in this world through adhyatma, through your swabhav, which creates the potential for you to exist within this world, that's then governed by karma, creating a specific body, made out of the 5 elements, which are the transitory reality that you're born into. And then all of these things flow and align. And they describe the nature of how the self comes in contact with this world, although ultimately having nothing to do with this world. Purusha cha adi daivata. And now the Purusha, the self, the spirit, is Purusha. So now Prakriti is Adhyatma, which is then interfaces with karma and creates your specific body, and the Purusha and Prakriti are distinct, spirit and matter. That leaves Brahman as being maybe God. You follow? Because if you say Purusha, the self, then that's a self distinct from matter. Therefore, Brahman now can't be redundant, so now Brahman becomes God. You follow? And now there's Brahman, the master of everything, indestructible, but then everything else is undergoing change. There is your phenomenal existence within this world, governed by karma, manifested as a body, but ultimately you are the soul, distinct. You are the Adidaiva. You are spiritual. You are distinct. Daiva is where you get the word divine from, by the way. From div, the root. It means transcendental. You guys following this? Probably not, but I'm making sense. I'm making sense. We'll go over it next week again. I'm just getting it on the table. But it flows. The ideas flow. And that's what I like about Ramanuja's commentaries. The ideas flow really well. Adiyagya. Adiyagyo. Aham. Evatra. Dehe. And I am the Adiyagya in the body. Deha Pratam. Vara. Oh, best of those who've accepted the body. He's talking to Arjuna. You've accepted the body. You're the best of the people who are embodied, and I am also in that body with you as the Adi Yagya, as the person that you do sacrifices for, but who's actually within your own heart. And there you have Krishna. And then you have Brahman as like spirit, and the Purusha and the Adi Yagya as 2 manifestations of spirit. And you have Adhyatma as the Prakriti principle that gives rise to this material world, karma, which is what deals with you, and then Adibhuta, which is your body that's transitory. Brahman is akshara, indestructible. Your body is kshara, destructible. And then you're the Purusha, who is distinct from this body, and I'm the Adi Yogi who's in this body with you and is also distinct from the body. And the person that you're worshipping and trying to know at the time of death. The indestructible transcendental living entity is called Brahman, so Prabhupada's going with that. And his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, so Prabhupada's going with that. Action pertaining to the development of material bodies of the living entities is called karma, further activities, okay. Best of the embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called Adibhuta. The universal form of the Lord, which includes the demigods, like the sun and the moon, is called Adidaiva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as the super soul in the heart of the living entity, every embodied being, am called Adi Yagya. So about half of Prabhupada are the same as what I just did, and half of them are different. And that's because there are multiple competing ways you could translate this stuff. And so I gave you the one I thought was the most conservative, and then also Prabhupada's. And Prabhupada has about half the points in common. Karma is common, Adi Yagya is common. Brahman is the individual soul, which I also said is possible. Then his eternal nature, Prabhupada is saying is Adhyatma, I'm saying it's material nature. So that's a big difference there. And then the material body, that's Adibhuta, we both got that. And then the Adidaiva, Prabhupada is saying, is not the Purusha, it's the universal form. Which is another, Purusha could also be universal form. The word Purusha means, if you go to a bathroom in India, they'll have Purush and Stri for male and female bathrooms. So Purush literally means male. And it also means living entity. So you would also be Purusha, even though you're in a female body. And it also means God. And so Purusha is another one of these enigmatic terms which gets used variously in Sanskrit. And you have to look at the context. There you go. Thank you, IGTV. Feedback. See why I told you guys